What many do not realize, we used to joke the title MD stands for making decisions. Because that's what you do as a physician daily, many of them. And then you walk in to a company, and one of the first things you realize, you will not be doing that.
This week on Leading Beyond the Lab, we're doing something different as we unpack the pivotal moment medical affairs is having with Vlado Kopernicky.
What was the reason that medical affairs became a commercial function?
Like Darwin's theory in biology, if you look at how economy gets to prosperity, it starts from a variety, then it goes through a filter or a selection process, all the way to scaling or adopting a treatment. Exactly the same thing happens in pharma, except that filter is probably tougher than in any other industry. And in that section on adopting a treatment into healthcare, that needs expertise. That's where I think companies started to realize, okay, this needs to get utilized differently.
So welcome to the podcast, Vlado.
Thanks for having me, actually.
We've known each other for a long time, so it's good to have you here.
That is correct, although I have to say maybe from the other side of the business, but it's very nice to also get to know this one.
And you made it here all the way from Austria.
Yeah, long journey. No, it's very easy. And as we discussed, my kids live here, so it's not something
They followed in your footsteps into being physicians.
Yes.
So to get us started, Vladimir, how did a neonatal intensive care physician become one of the most senior figures in medical affairs?
I get, as you can imagine, I get asked this question quite often, or got asked this question quite often when I still worked in pharma. My usual short response is by accident or in a very naive way, because first, I loved my clinical life. I worked in the ICU with prematurely born kids, and I never thought of leaving that field. And at one point, I needed to bridge a period of 2 years to be able to return and practice in the US. And Lilly happened to be the company I joined. But I was previously completely firewalled from pharma, so I had no idea how it works, what it does. And I walked into that in a very naive way and somehow found things exciting enough. The company gave me tons of opportunities to grow and do exciting things. And I ended up staying 26 years.
It's a long time, isn't it? 26 years.
Very long, yes. But it doesn't feel like that.
Yeah. And you had a first front row seat to an interesting transformation. I mean, if I think back to what we've seen over the past 5 years, medical affairs has really gone from a scientific support function to kind of being a bedrock of the commercial side of the business in many respects. I'd love to hear your take on that and how your thinking has been transformed along that journey.
Yeah, I probably had a few moments which has formed that. The first one was when I moved to a regional role to launch a new product in a completely new therapy area for the company, and I had a stellar counterpart on the marketing side. We were sitting in the same room and in essence cross-fertilizing. I was learning a bit about business and he was learning a bit about how medics think about things. Because what many do not realize, if you come to pharma, or at least my experience, and many confirmed this to me, was we used to joke with a colleague of mine when we were doing lectures on evidence-based medicine and similar topics that the title MD stands for making decisions. Because that's what you do as a physician daily, many of them, often about individual patients, often very significant ones. And then you walk in to a company, and one of the first things you realize, you will not be doing that, depending on where you join, but in most cases, at least you will not be the only one making a decision. And then you get into a room with a bunch of people who are very savvy in business, and then you realize you don't know the language. And then you are sitting there, typically with your high ego, because you are a doctor.
Yeah.
And you don't ask that many questions, because otherwise it would be what was that? I didn't get that. So you end up being more on the silent side, which others then look at as, okay, either that's arrogance or no interest or not engaging with the topic, etc. Until you learn slowly by listening, doing, failing, etc. And then you start realizing that actually there is an intersection between them. What I never got taught was how successful the business model of pharma is and how it's driven by prosperity and profit. That took some time until I started to realize, okay, we all need to contribute to generating that profit, because that's what drives then all the innovation and the progress overall in healthcare.
So you've joined the pharma industry, and you're an MD that could go in various routes, be in medical affairs, and now you're looking to launch products with a commercial mindset, or at least with a commercial focus. So what target were you going after? What was the layout of the landscape like at that time? Can you talk me through that?
Yes, we've had multiple, but probably the one which shaped me the most was when we entered the area of erectile dysfunction with a product which was going to compete with the best recognized pharmaceutical brand in the world at that time, against what was at that time the largest pharmaceutical company. And we knew that we need to be extremely well prepared for that. And we had a joint venture with a small biotech company which was helping us also to remind ourselves how we should stay nimble through that process. And I had a fantastic marketing counterpart to work with on that, who has taught me a lot about business. But we also have done tremendous work to build the brand, build the data around that, learn how to translate that data, etc. And it was fascinating for me to see, obviously as a neonatologist, to enter this field. I was often joking that it was a fantastic thing to give me for icebreakers, because often people do icebreakers and they ask you, okay, what is the one thing you can tell about yourself? Which nobody knows. And I would often say I'm the only neonatologist who dealt with erectile dysfunction.
Helping men everywhere.
And that has brought a lot of experience, freedom, me putting hands on things I'm not sure I would have had it been something else, including doing my own research, including doing launch symposia as the sole speaker across, 17, 20 countries at that time. And eventually seeing how we had the first, 2 or 3 countries in the region together with my marketing counterpart, where we surpassed the market share of Viagra. So that was me seeing it from the very offset of the launch, or even pre-launch, all the way to getting into a huge success story.
So when you got the results to beat your market, obviously the better products is one thing. Was there anything else that you did which was, do you think, a key determinant as to why you were so successful?
I tend to think that it was the way we built the brand itself. There was a lot of research on the emotional side of patients, a lot of research on how physicians who treat these patients think, and we have made sure that we communicate all of this without deviating from it, because the knee-jerk reaction would have been, we just have a better product. Without explaining it, and without explaining it in a language which resonates with both the physician and the patient. We had multiple times reactions from physicians which were like, really, those type of emotional things, until they heard it from the patient. And that's when they realized, okay, there must be something. Plus, once a patient tried the medicine, they went back to their physicians.
And so, on that journey, you've witnessed medical affairs transform and what makes excellence in that space. And so, when did the movement towards making medical affairs a commercial a part of the commercialization, or a key part of that, when did that start to happen?
I tend to explain the origin of med affairs as something what started when many countries and companies had physicians on the development side and started to see that with the changes in the environment and how the importance of embedding a medicine into healthcare, not just promoting it in a very simple way, started to become more and more important. And companies started to evolve into slivers of medical affairs all the way to full investment. That went through multiple wrong turns. People did not really know what the right approach would be, did not really know what is the most compliant or the compliant approach to that. And that has led also to a lot of to a lack of identity, if you wish. Where does medical affairs actually belong? Not just because of reporting line, but where in the life cycle and on which side should it operate? Where can it have its biggest impact?
So what was the reason that medical affairs became a commercial function? Did someone, was it just become quite relevant? Was it a conversation with KOLs and people started to realise that actually when you get a medical affairs representative talking rather than a salesperson to these people, the impact was much greater? Or have you got any examples of what kind of that exemplify what that was or what that meant?
My personal opinion on this one, but a very personal one, is the business model in pharma, and I'm not speaking about one company, I think this was an overarching approach, was building reciprocity or reciprocal behavior. You get something, you give something in return. To a certain point where this got exaggerated, fines were given to several within pharma, and eventually the environment said, no, this model is not appropriate. We are talking healthcare. This needs to be done properly, ethically, etc. And that's when companies started to realize, okay, if you look at how economy gets to prosperity, it starts from a variety, or what we would call innovation. Then it goes through a filter or a selection process, like Darwin's theory in biology, all the way to scaling or adopting a treatment. Exactly the same thing happens in pharma, except that filter is probably tougher than in any other industry. You have the filter of biology, you have the filter of clinical research, the filter of regulator, the filter of payer, and then it comes to the clinic. It needs to pass all those before it gets scaled and before it starts generating profit and, in essence, prosperity for the company or for the industry. And in that section, that portion on adopting a treatment into healthcare, that needs expertise. That needs a translation of knowledge into a care reality, if you wish. And that's where I think companies started to realize, okay, this needs to get utilized differently. But as I mentioned, there were legacy ways of working, putting firewalls, putting all sorts of hurdles as to what can and cannot be done, often for reasons which should not have been in the forefront. And that has created a lot of question marks about what is actually the value of medical affairs. Does it have value if it cannot operate fully in commercializing medicines? Or can it, and what would it look like? And we were semi-jokingly then saying, guys, if we do not answer that question, what is the value of medical affairs fast enough? The next question is, do we need medical affairs? So that is why we saw the imperative to do something about this.
And you were famous for tracking metrics and things like that internally.
Gosh, did it get all the way to you?
Was there any specific ones that demonstrated that?
I'm a strong believer in something what somebody much smarter than me said decades ago. Tell me how you measure me, and I will tell you how I behave.
I like that.
And we did not really measure, because in those what I call legacy ways of working, we convinced ourselves that you cannot, because it's the sales reps who are measured.
Yeah.
And anybody else who works on the medical side, it's dangerous, because you could be accused that you are measuring because driving revenue and I don't know what else. Up to a point where we got to or I got into a one-on-one discussion with one of our leaders, who told me very briefly, Vlado, MSLs are a way too expensive resource which brings too little value for the customer. And obviously I'm not the one who would say, okay, thank you for the feedback, let's cancel the role or something. So I asked my marketing colleagues, guys, can you dig out for me the net promoter score in customers who are seen by MSLs, and compare it with customers who have not been seen by MSLs in the same therapy area, ideally. So just sales reps. And there was a huge difference. People initially, the reaction was, this is not a priority. We will come whenever we have time. And a few days later, they are knocking on my door, and they show me the huge difference. And they say, that's not why we came, because we then compared other attributes we measure, and we have never seen a picture like that.
What other attributes?
These were brand attributes, comparing
Like trustworthiness,
a specific brand. It was across a variety of domains, perceptions of efficacy, safety, overall the company, etc. And it's usually done as a comparison to another product and another company, how they are doing it across those attributes.
I suppose that's important context, because even if the data is still really good, the way that the medical affairs person will represent that data or communicate it is probably very different to a sales, or probably more detail-oriented than perhaps a sales rep.
This is literally a survey which is sent to physicians, and not all of them choose to respond to it. But we found a group within a therapy area in a country, which happened to be UK, in fact, where we had enough to at least have a look. And that basically what you see is, are you at parity with your competitor, or do you have a strength across a domain, or do you own a domain? That's ideal. Or the other side is you have a weakness, or the other company owns. And for those customers who were seen by MSL, in this small analysis, it was all ownership on our side. So I saw, okay, we have something in our hands, and that's when we have asked colleagues to look at productivity. And productivity was very low. It's an expensive resource. It brings a lot of value, except we are not scaling it.
Okay. Yeah.
And to what I said previously, if you want to go to prosperity, you got to be able to have a scaling process until you reach that. So that's why we then said, okay, we want people to start looking at this differently, from supervisors all the way to individual MSLs, and we want to track it, and we want to achieve a specific level.
You're in a situation where you've got a long-sighted view, you're believing in the pipeline, you're putting in place, you've got great values in the business, and you've hired great people. Everyone's bought into the fact that this is a company of the future, so stick with it. and whilst you're doing that, you're still innovating. You're still putting new processes. You're still thinking about the ways that you can have your 1% efficiencies and, extra edges, if you like, to be ahead of your competitors. That's a hard thing to do when when investor pressure's there and things like that. So I'm just intrigued to see if there's anything that you think, any comments you have about how you maintain that tunnel vision.
So, as I mentioned earlier, focus was a big part of this, and I think here the company was really great, and I like Steve Jobs' definition of focus, where I will paraphrase, where he said something along the lines of, it's not the things you choose to do, the few things you choose to do. Focus is all the many cool things you choose not to do, so that you do the few extremely well, because you can focus people, resources, money, on those and get them much better, rather than get a higher number of ideas or focus areas slightly better. And many underestimate that, how much that helps. So that was one. The second one, from my own experience, just moving medical, which was large, outside of the US, you start realizing that, and that was a big learning, and obviously a learning through multiple failures as well. You realize that not everybody sees the picture you see. And I was not experienced enough at the very offset of it to start dealing with that. Okay, there are people who see exactly that picture. There are people who don't see it, but they trust. And then there are people who don't see it and they have difficulties to trust the picture of future. And how do you get everybody on board, and how do you get everybody paddle the same direction? That was an art to do, and I realized that only when.
So what was the turning point there? There must have been an inflection point.
That was a very interesting one for me, at least personally. We were going to do a kickoff of a big transformation in medical affairs, and for that, I was going to have a moderator, an external person, experienced in doing those type of venues. And after a few discussions, he looked at me and says, "Can I send you a questionnaire?" I was like, "Okay, yeah." So he sent me a questionnaire. I filled it out. I sent it back to him. And he calls me one day and he says, "I have done the assessment. This is a questionnaire which assesses people on a spectrum from innovative all the way to followers. And you are obviously on the left side of the spectrum. How often do you have people where you see that they don't see the picture you see?" Quite often. So, okay, and do you know, or is it difficult for you to make them see it or go with you? So, yeah. And he then explained to me, you can repeat 1,000 times and paint that picture, they still don't see it. What they need to see is the steps in between.
Yes, yeah.
To start following you. And that was a huge revelation for me, because I am not the most patient person, and once I'm convinced that something is a good way of going, then I don't want to deviate, and then you need to figure a way how you take people with you.
So on that journey, how did your philosophy change, if it did, around what the leaders needed to be like in that business?
I was focusing heavily on what leaders in medical affairs need to be, because we used to have leaders who were experts in their field, very experienced, extremely well educated. But as I mentioned at the beginning, the business side of their education and experience and the leadership side of their education and experience was disproportionately low. And that applied to myself as well when they got into pharma. So the more I started to be convinced that Med Affairs needs to start matching how the economy of pharma is working and how it should start gravitating towards the commercialization space of pharma, yet still deliver what it is supposed to deliver, that's where I started to look at profiles of people who are not only able but willing to engage that direction. Historically, we, I think, erred on a side of, okay, let's hire somebody, and in the process of hiring them, we will tell them, oh, you will put your hands on research, just to disappoint them that, yes, they had some small impact on research, but the majority of their tasks were on the commercialization side. And if you don't have the background
Or the interest.
Then you start gravitating all sorts of directions and do.
That's dangerous.
It is.
Yeah. And it pulls away from what you talked about earlier, where everyone's steering in the same direction, which I think is important in any business environment, especially a big one.
It still is a scary thought for many. When I open a discussion now, speaking to other companies, in fact, I'm talking in a conference tomorrow exactly about this topic. The reaction is not always, oh yes. It's often a really commercialization kind of.
Yeah.
That's not the space where medical should be. But once you start explaining the evolution of pharma, what are the driving forces, that's when people start realizing, okay, but who else?
And logically, if you're in the circle, you can influence it more than outside looking in. You know, it's like anything, isn't it? If you've got relationships with those people, you're influencing decisions. Which is what it should be, I suppose, because then you can actually take a front row role in making sure that things are done ethically and everything else, with the patient at heart. So when you look back at your career, Vlado, what are the key milestones that you're most proud of?
As rich as it was, and as long as it was, I would still put in the first place the picture I see now when I look at my kids. What they have grown into, etc., through the period where I was very busy, often not there, but how many opportunities they've had because of living in multiple countries, being able to get good education, etc., and where they are now. That probably surpasses anything else for me. If you ask just from a career perspective, it has a very interesting spin for me now, because I see two pictures which I have not seen from inside the company. One is my former colleagues telling me how good they are doing, both in terms of medical affairs, but also themselves as individuals, but also seeing what others are doing and knowing where we were. And that actually is associated with a significant sense of pride, because I can easily talk to others about where they should be from experience, not just from theory. And that's what I personally consider a significant achievement.
Yeah, so you've played a big role in these people's careers.
Like you always do as a leader.
But also the patients they're impacting, right? So, and the disease area in general, which is definitely something to be proud of. Do you buy into the concept that, we hear when physicians first move into pharma, where they want to effectively help patients at scale, as opposed to kind of seeing 20, 30 patients a day in a clinic?
So I see this as two different pictures. There is one where you personally make clinical decisions and go through that combination of evidence, experience, emotion, and combining it into a single patient story, versus observing the impact something you contributed to has for many. Somebody just told me a few weeks ago that apparently last year was the first year where the prevalence of obesity in the US has not grown. Those are the types of things one would see. I remember we were once preparing for a discussion with a payer, and we put together a story around oncological treatments of colorectal cancer, where the argument or the counter argument used to be, yeah, but the increases in survival rates are marginal or small or short. But if you look at a period of, I think it was 10, 15 years, and the advance those small increments got for a patient eventually, it started to become years. Those are huge things as well. If you look at them through the big picture.
So with the benefit of hindsight, walking into a different pharma company now to lead medical affairs or medical function, clinical functions again, what would be the first thing you'd look at to see if the transformation is possible and why?
Well, if we were talking about transformation, I probably would be very interested to listen to those who would be hiring me.
Okay, yeah.
And making sure that they actually, one, know what they want, understand or are willing to understand what they could have,
Yeah.
and willing to support that.
Yeah.
If you don't see that, if you see someone who hesitates or who just wants a pro forma, I need a leader here, but it's medical affairs kind of supporter, that's a difficult start to have. If you see someone who says, okay, Vlado, what is your view? This is my view, and we have a good intersection between them, that's when you can start something.
We've got time for one more question, Vlado. What would be, who are the people along your career that have played a role as, or that stand out as mentors or people you looked up to? Does anyone kind of jump out?
There were many. I don't know that I would name one or two single people. If you listen through your career, you often listen to different levels. I had very good peer coaches who have helped me in situations where either I was lost or I needed a hint, like my marketing counterpart from early on was a fantastic peer coach for me. I often had people who mentored me upwards or reverse, making decisions, I don't know, for example, gender related. I got fantastic advice from reverse mentoring as well. And then similarly, on the leadership side, people who either supervised me or who were making decisions about my own career, they would often give me, if not a comprehensive advice, at least a bit of a hint or redirecting a little bit, or just a sentence which made it either clear or made me calm down in situations where I felt confused, lost, not knowing where, which direction, etc.
It's sometimes helpful, isn't it, having people that have been there and made the mistakes before?
I remember once I was in the US affiliate, and relatively quickly I got into a much bigger role than I thought I would have at that time, without actually having tons of experience. And through that transition, I didn't have a chance to meet with the top head of medical affairs there. And once we were walking to our cars in the parking, and he came to me and he said, "Hey, we didn't have a chance to talk about this. First of all, congratulations. And I see that you are a bit scared," or I don't remember exactly what he said. He said, "I am not, because I know that you don't know, you know what you don't know. And I know you will come and ask. So you will not play the..."
Yes, man,
and
yeah.
that was
Yeah.
super helpful for me, knowing, okay, he knows. So I can come to him and he's not going to look at it as, oh, he doesn't know this. He's actually expecting it. And often as a leader, you underestimate the impact of such small conversations, hints you have on other people.
Yeah. It's probably quite profound when you look back now.
Yeah. Yeah, several of these are.
Thank you so much, Vlado.
More than welcome.
Appreciate you joining me on the podcast today
Thank you for having me here. This is a quite cool place, I have to say.
and taking the time out of your visit to see your children in London as well.
Exactly.